and welcome to today's live webcast in partnership with ProPhotonix. This webcast will look at particle analysis, some of the applications and the optical technologies behind it. Particle analysis is used to evaluate the size, shape, distribution and concentration of particles in materials and environments. It's an important process across multiple industries to ensure product quality, safety and compliance with regulatory standards. I'm Keely and I'll be your moderator today, and I'm very delighted to be joined by our expert speakers, Jeremy Lane, Managing Director at ProPhotonix UK, and Jessie Lehman, Engineering Manager at Climate Instruments. In terms of our format, we'll have a short presentation from each speaker, followed by a Q&A section. If you want to send your questions as they occur to you, feel free to do so and we'll ask them at the end, but don't feel that you have to wait. So, without further ado, we'll get started and I shall hand over to Jeremy.
Thank you to everyone joining us today. I'll speak here about particle size analysis and particle characterization and their industrial applications, touching on some of the associated optical techniques. Before I get into the technical aspects of the presentation, let me spend just a couple of minutes introducing Exactera. We're a company, or rather a group of companies, delivering to our customers light-based solutions including LED as well as laser technology. As the group comes together, and I'll introduce the three businesses that currently make up Exactera in a moment, our customer values are based around a unified strategy, one set of processes to provide consistent service to our customers, and working towards one point of contact regardless of brand. We operate in the application areas that matter, providing solutions for machine vision, industrial, and medical and scientific applications. And we have a global presence with 57% of our turnover in Europe, the Middle East and Africa, 36% in the Americas, and 7% in the Asia Pacific region. Exactera was formed 3 years ago as Z-Laser and ProPhotonix were acquired. Since then, Advanced Illumination has joined the group, and there are plans for further acquisitions to build an even stronger presence in the world of photonics. The range of market segments we serve is extremely broad, from pharmaceutical, scientific, medical and dental, through food and beverage, printing and packaging, to automotive, aerospace, transportation and construction. So, let's move on to talk about particle analysis. And first, I'd like to extend the definition of particles beyond the idea of finely divided solid dispersed in air. I want to include solids dispersed in other gases, but also liquid droplets dispersed in air or gas as aerosols or sprays, as well as immiscible liquid-in-liquid dispersions. And finally, many of the optical techniques used to study solid dispersions can also be applied to study gas bubbles in a continuous liquid phase. We may be looking to use analytical techniques simply to detect the presence of particulate matter, but more typically we'll want to quantify them in terms of number and volume and therefore size. And we may also be wanting to understand a range of other properties around the shape, structure and surface properties, for example, to better control a manufacturing process in the food industry or in pharmaceuticals, or to assess the impact of waste emissions from heavy industrial processes and the impact of those particles on the environment. Of course, there are many reasons for concern about the presence of particulate matter, solid particles or liquid droplets, in the natural environment, whether their source is natural or from human activity. but the quality of the air we breathe is of special concern. The World Health Organization estimates that poor air quality is a major contributor to the cause of more than 7 million deaths every year. 93% of the world's population live in areas where air quality is below that recommended by WHO guidelines. As you might expect, this is more of an issue in the heavily populated and industrialized, but otherwise less developed parts of the globe. Optical analytical techniques provide an opportunity to establish air quality monitoring programs that, in turn, drive research-based policies and solutions. There are a range of methods involved in particulate matter analysis, including some well-established alternatives to optical methods. On the left here, we've a schematic for a sampling method where particulate matter is collected, normally by filtration, and analysed later. Fractionation and gravimetric analysis give information about the total quantity of material collected and particle size distribution. Using chemical analysis by X-ray fluorescence and the various types of mass spectrometry and atomic absorption or emission spectroscopy, we can get detailed information about the chemical composition of particulates to help determine the source. Put together, all of that information can often give a very good indication about the source of the particulate matter and tell us how concerning it might be. But it's only when we introduce optical particle counters and light scattering instruments that we can achieve practical and cost-effective real-time monitoring of industrial processes or environmental conditions. The schematic on the right is for a typical laser diffraction optical system and includes a light source, which might be a red, infrared or blue-violet laser, a sample handling system, an array of photodetectors, and data recording equipment. The range of market segments for which analysis of particulates plays an important role is truly vast. In medical and biomedical applications, measurement allows better control of particle size in production processes, which in turn ensures higher quality and more consistent output, improved drug delivery and greater drug efficacy. The ability to better understand the physical and chemical characteristics of particles is opening the way for development of innovative new materials in the world of nanoparticles and biomaterials. Particle analysis allows the formulation of better foods, cosmetics, paints and printing inks. And of course, particle analysis is used to both improve product quality and to monitor and help prevent or at least reduce the impact of heavy industrial and agricultural processes on the environment. Returning to air quality monitoring, we find laser diffraction and light scattering being used alongside other optical methods to build a complete picture of both particulate matter and gas composition. Laser-based methods are especially useful in quantifying PM10 and PM2.5 particulates. These are particles with a diameter of less than 10 microns and less than 2.5 microns respectively, and they are of concern because they may cause not only irritation to the lining of the lungs and to mucous membranes and so on, but they can also be absorbed through the lining of the lungs and into the bloodstream, especially in the case of PM2.5 particles, and lead to some very serious long-term health problems. But lasers are also used in gas analysis for ozone, the oxides of nitrogen, sulfur and carbon, and detection of, for example, pollutants like ammonia. And finally here, lasers might be used simply to measure visibility where dust and other contaminants cause health and safety issues associated with reduced visibility. These play a part in air quality monitoring in situations as diverse as clean rooms and the monitoring of vehicle emissions. Okay, I want to move on now to take a look at a few customer applications supported by Exactera with our laser technology. We have a number of customer applications in dust detection, either for monitoring the effectiveness of bag filters by measuring the dust in a post-filter stack, or for monitoring soot release from incinerators or powders escaping from powder production facilities like cement works, mills, industrial calcinators, or metal smelting works. These provide continuous emission monitoring capabilities, often using a combination of light scattering and transmittance measurement. Light scattering, where laser light is scattered onto an array of photodetectors, can be a very sensitive detection and analysis technique, providing details of both volume and particle size distribution, even when the volume concentration of particulates is very low, when a filtration system is operating effectively and there are no unusual accidental releases of dust, for example. Transmittance measurements typically take over when the volume concentration of particulates suddenly increases, overwhelming the light scattering measurement equipment and raising an alarm. Alongside the light scattering method, an alternative optical technique might well be used to analyze the gas phase in which the particulates are suspended or dispersed. Again, this is applicable to many different market segments, including vehicle exhaust monitors and the measurement of emissions from other combustion and industrial manufacturing processes. The diagram here is the schematic for an FTIR ammonia analyzer, but light absorption measurement might alternatively use a different specific wavelength of light, UV, visible or infrared. Or it may use a broad spectrum light source. A broad spectrum source allows for detection of a wider range of gases, whereas a narrow range, perhaps tunable laser source, can be used for closer examination of a critical region of the spectrum and more sensitive detection or more precise measurement of a specific gas. I spoke a little earlier about air quality monitoring in the wider outdoor environment. There's also growing interest in monitoring indoor air quality. The air we breathe in offices and other workplaces, as well as in our homes and even in places like aircraft cabins and railway carriages, can theoretically at least be more controlled in terms of particulates and other contaminants. And it's often circulated and recirculated and replaced with some fresh air from outdoors using pumps and filters. In these circumstances, there's an opportunity to introduce particle measurement and gas analysis with active feedback into the HVAC system to go well beyond simple temperature and humidity control to ensure a safe living and working environment. The air supply for even a large building can be centrally monitored for volatile organic compounds and toxic gases, and optical particle counters and particle sizers used to make sure that the air supply is safe. When we get into nanomaterials and biomaterials characterization, we may well need to use multiple wavelengths of light and techniques beyond light scattering to get the most detailed information about the particles themselves, to measure their physical size and their chemical composition, and perhaps to image them. Again, a wide range of different wavelengths are used to provide different information, but they tend to be shorter wavelengths, ultraviolet, blue, green, or sometimes the shorter red wavelengths, for maximum sensitivity in the measurement of the smallest particles. Fluorescent spectroscopy is often chosen for the chemical analysis of biomaterials or synthetic organic materials, in virology, drug development and delivery, and in biotherapeutics. Another application for laser-induced fluorescence, sometimes combined with video microscopy measurement, is in the detection, measurement and characterization of aromatic hydrocarbons in water. This is important for ensuring drinking water quality as well as monitoring accidental releases, for example around offshore oil production platforms and drilling sites, or offshore installations like wind farms. The various analytical techniques can be used simultaneously to excite hydrocarbon molecules and detect their presence based on the resulting optical emissions in fluorescent spectroscopy. To measure absorption of light across a range of wavelengths and identify the precise chemical composition of the hydrocarbons present, and to image droplets for size determination. These optical methods together allow for continuous monitoring of hydrocarbon production and supply facilities, as well as ensuring that water treatment plant is operating effectively either for drinking water supply or for industrial wastewater treatment. That final example brings me to the end of my presentation today. Thank you for your attention, and thank you again for joining us today.
Amazing to think how many applications there are for particle analysis and how important it actually is. So now I am going to hand over to Jessie's presentation. Jessie, over to you.
Welcome to Climate's Particle Counter Technical presentation. It is our hope that this presentation will be both educational and informative. First, let's do a quick overview of Climate Instruments Company. Regarding Climate, we were founded in 1962 and have been manufacturing particle counters longer than anyone else. Our instruments are purpose-built for the regulated environment, and indeed, 95% of our customers are large pharmaceutical producers and medical device manufacturers. All products are manufactured in Redlands, California, and our quality system is both ISO 9001 and ISO 17025 accredited. Climate is indeed an innovator, not an imitator. For decades, Climate has introduced a number of unique products and features that today are industry standard. This includes, but is not limited to, a continuous monitoring particle counter with a built-in vacuum pump, and even the portable particle counter were all first introduced by Climate decades ago. In 2017, Climate pioneered the CIX70. When used with a high-pressure diffuser and with a special multi-gas calibration, the CIX70 remains the only portable particle counter that can be used with multiple gases including clean dry air, or CDA, nitrogen, argon, and CO2. Next, we'll be discussing how Climate qualifies laser diodes. Climate qualifies laser diodes based on three fundamental criteria. The first is long life, and in particular we are looking for a diode's ability to generate heat and sensitivity to heat. Our goal is to have a laser diode that can be used daily and will last 12 to 14 years on average. Next is output stability. Jitter causes sizing errors and false high counts, which is unacceptable. Third is resolution, as the laser diode has to provide a narrow response to particles in order to mitigate sizing errors. The ISO 21501-4 standard allows for a plus or minus 15% or lower variance. Because of Climate's stringent qualification standards, the particle size resolution on our instrumentation well exceeds the ISO standard and averages 8%. The optical output in a particle counter is monitored and the input current is regulated to ensure output stability. As the current in a laser diode increases over time, a point is eventually reached where the output power suddenly falls away and irreversible damage occurs. This form of failure is known as COD, or catastrophic optical damage, When COD occurs, high output levels cause a short that melts a part of the laser diode's edge. At this point, crystal defects form. This occurs when the current needed to provide the fixed output increases by 20% or more of its initial value. In order to extend the life of the laser diode, Climate sets the initial power output to a minimum of 20% below the maximum specification. Moreover, as our instruments are used in mission-critical life science applications, Climate maintains a unit history on all instruments manufactured and monitors laser current during the annual interval calibration. Next, we will discuss Climate's unique sensor design. Aerosol particle counters actively draw air into the instrument. This air column intersects a laser, and this intersection is called the view volume. When the laser strikes a particle in the view volume, light is scattered in all directions. The light scatter pattern shown here as dash marks is referred to as me-scatter. A mirror reflects the light scatter into a photodetector. The photodetector converts this photonic energy into electrical current, or a signal. Depending on the amplitude of the signal spike, we can both count and size an airborne particle. When counting and in particular, when sizing a particle, there's a basic law of physics that the more light scatter that can be detected, the more accurate and precise the measurement. Indeed, there are three types of optical sensors, which we will discuss next. The first type of optical sensor is a front scatter optical sensor. Here, the sensor only measures light scatter coming off the front lobe of the me-scatter, and even this is partially blocked by the light trap. Although inexpensive, this type of sensor is generally used in handheld particle counters, is notoriously inaccurate, and extremely susceptible to changes in temperature, relative humidity, and barometric pressure. Subsequently, handheld particle counters are absolutely not recommended for deployments in life science cleanrooms. Where they do make sense is when used in IAQ, or indoor air quality investigations, where you're trying to measure large variances in particle concentrations. Next, we have a side scatter optical sensor, or as shown here, a dual side scatter optical sensor. Although this sensor design has better collection of light compared to a forward scatter sensor, you lose light scatter coming off the back and front lobes, as well as the top and bottom of the view volume. This type of sensor is used by Climate's competitors, and is one of the root causes for its wide distribution and inability to statistically maintain an ISO-compliant calibration over time. As mentioned previously, Climate is the only particle counter manufacturer that uses a wide scatter optical sensor that encircles the entire view volume and air column. This sensor allows Climate to capture and measure light scatter from 360 degrees. Climate's patented sensor design provides our company a significant competitive advantage in both accuracy and precision of measurement. Another reason quality managers sole source Climate instrumentation is because our sensor design is hyper-accurate and precise. Assuming the bullseye is the international calibration standard, Climate designed our particle counters to ensure all measurements are highly accurate and precise, especially when operated continuously over time, where thermal variations inside the particle counter can cause short-term calibration drift. In 2019, Climate conducted a study among our top 3 competitors. We chose to measure the 100% count efficiency test, which is the most difficult standard to meet. Over a 3-hour period, we took 10 measurements at regular intervals. From these measurements, we calculated the average, the standard deviation, the probability of being able to hold a calibration, and then charted the distribution on a bell curve. To meet the ISO 21501-4 standard, the lowest channel is challenged with particles 1.5 to 2 times its size, and the counts must be within plus or minus 10%, or between 90% to 110% of the particle count. Test acceptance criteria was established by a survey among quality managers who unanimously agreed that 100% of all measurements must statistically satisfy the ISO standard. Climate was the only instrument to pass all acceptance criteria, and testing demonstrated 3 to 5.5 times greater accuracy and precision compared to competitive alternatives. This is due to its unique wide-scatter optical sensor, high-quality materials with no plastics in our laser or collection optics. Climate is also the only manufacturer that locks the laser alignment during the manufacturing process, which will be discussed shortly. Also, the rhodium-plated nickel mirror offers the dual benefits of having an extremely low coefficient of thermal expansion, combined with an outstanding signal-to-noise ratio. To confirm, climate instrumentation is purpose-built to exceed standards for the regulated life science industry. So, what else makes climate unique? As mentioned before, climate uniquely locks the laser alignment during manufacturing. This process takes 24 hours, and if the laser is out of tolerance, it's torn apart and the process starts over. To the contrary, our competitors use set screws that take all of 3 seconds to align a laser. The reason we use a significantly more expensive process is for quality reasons. Specifically, this proprietary process significantly mitigates interval calibration failures. Another unique feature of the climate particle counter is its rhodium-plated nickel ellipsoidal mirror. Rhodium is 10 times more expensive than gold. And the reason we use rhodium is that it's resistant to contamination, corrosion, decomposition, and wear. It is because of these properties that rhodium is used in dental mirrors and nuclear reactors. These high-quality materials also play an integral role in extending the life of the instrument to 10 years and frequently beyond. This concludes our particle counter technical presentation. As mentioned, we hope you learned something new about aerosol and particle measurement, as well as climate's unique competitive advantages in the life science regulated industry.
Thanks very much, Jessie, for that presentation as well. Now we move on to our Q&A section. So just to let you know, we don't have Jessie here for the live Q&A, but please, if you want to send any questions, we will forward them on to him and he can answer them later. So we just have Jeremy, who's very kindly agreed to answer all of our questions today. So we will take the first question. Jeremy, the first question is, please could you explain how particle size distribution data is used in real time to optimize industrial processes, for example, in the pharmaceutical or food industries?
Yeah, sure. So, yes, there are many similarities between the way these techniques are used in the pharmaceutical industry and in the food industry, and that there are a few differences as well, of course. Primarily, they're used to provide direct feedback into the milling or grinding process. In some cases, they might be used to simply identify contaminants or to provide data on quality assurance. In most cases, though, of course, they'll control the milling process to ensure the particle size is correct, is what's needed. And the correct particle size is determined really by two things. One is around materials handling. So very often in these industries, the powders are transported from one place to another within a manufacturing facility or into transport or out of transport by picking them up in a stream of air or gas, maybe it's nitrogen, maybe it's another gas, and transporting them from place to place, and they'll only behave as they're expected to and required to if they've got the right particle size, right particle size distribution and the right particle shape. But there are also other aspects of the sort of physical properties, like in the pharmaceutical industry, powders might be simply compressed to produce a tablet. And if they don't have the right particle characteristics physically, they're not compressed into a strong enough and robust enough tablet. But the other big factor here is the surface area and the surface properties. So those will determine, for example, the solubility in a food manufacturing process, and in the pharmaceutical industry, they're going to determine things like bioavailability. It's linked, of course, to solubility, but if the particle distribution is such that the surface area is very large, that's going to have different bioavailability to a very small surface area.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. And regarding the use of optical techniques for monitoring emissions, what are some of the challenges you'd say in applying these methods to high particulate environments, such as industrial incinerators or cement works?
Well, those sorts of environments can be very challenging in several different ways. So they can be chemically corrosive environments. They can be physically abrasive environments, particularly if you're dealing with very abrasive minerals. And they're often very challenging environments thermally. So they may be very high temperature environments, they may be very low temperature environments. Both of those are difficult, but even more difficult, of course, is if the temperature is changing frequently and very rapidly. The effect of all of those can be reduced by choosing materials for the whole system. It's not just the laser, it's the entire monitoring system. So you're needing to choose materials of construction that are resistant to chemical attack, that are resistant to abrasion, and also that really provide a lot of stability in changing temperature environments. That's one important aspect. We're sometimes using, whereas for a laser for a less challenging environment, we might use aluminium or even brass. In these situations, we might choose invar, for example, which gives you a lot of stability and a lot of resistance to attack. The other aspect of changing temperature is that we need to make sure we've got optical output from the laser and I think sensitivity of the sensor system as well as consistent and stable as possible. So we're using drive electronics for the laser or sensing electronics for the sensor, which compensate for changing temperature. And wherever possible, we're looking to stabilize the shape of the beam as well, so that when we're sampling the particles in perhaps in a stream of gas or a smokestack, for example, we're getting consistent energy density from the laser into the sample area. So if the beam stays the same size and the same shape and also points in the same direction and has the same optical output power, we're going to get consistent results.
Fantastic, thank you. And how can optical particle counters adapt to the unique challenges of monitoring smaller, more enclosed environments, such as offices or transport systems, as opposed to outdoor air monitoring?
Yeah, okay, so the indoor environments are almost the opposite of those environments I just discussed, I suppose. So they tend to be less chemically challenging. The volume and the concentration of particulates is less, so there's less of an issue with abrasion. The temperature is fairly constant because it's a living or working environment. So you don't, to the same extent, have those challenges. But whereas if you're looking at an outdoor application, you're typically concerned with perhaps just one or two types of contaminant. You're normally, or our customers are normally developing systems that will monitor emissions from a chemical works where you know what the chemical is. It might be a cement works, you know it's cement dust, and you're really only concerned with that one type of material. Or you might be producing a monitor for monitoring vehicle emissions, for example, or smoke from forest fires. It's typically one or perhaps two different types of particulate. Whereas in an indoor environment, you're looking at the general air quality. So you're often trying to integrate systems that will measure, dust, of course, and that can be mineral dust, but it's also sort of biological skin cells and so on within the air that we're breathing. But you're also probably interested in identifying whether those materials are organic or inorganic, and if they're organic, are they things like mold spores, for example, or other materials that are going to cause allergies.
or adverse reactions in the people breathing them. You might also be very interested in the composition of gases in the air that we're breathing, and also vapors, things like volatile organic compounds that are vapors in the air. So you're often trying to integrate particle measurement, particle detection, particle measurement in terms of concentration, size and shape with other analytical techniques. And you might be using spectroscopy, fluorescent spectroscopy, for example, to identify and characterize what those materials are. You might be using transmission spectroscopy or absorption spectroscopy to identify the composition of the air that we're breathing in. So it's a more complex system, perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Jeremy. If there are no more questions, then that brings us to the end of today's webcast. Just to let you know, it will be available on the Electro-Optics website, and that's www.electrooptics.com for the next 12 months on demand. But obviously, please note that the live Q&A function won't work on the on-demand version. So I'd just like to take the opportunity to say a big thank you again to Jeremy and to Jessie and to our sponsor, ProPhotonix. Thank you ever so much for today. Thanks to David and the Europa Science production team in the background, helping to get this webcast technically right. And thanks very much to everyone who's taken the time to join and to watch. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.